Hey everyone, this is Will Robinson Smith, your host of Old, New, and Now, playing your time machine through the world of movies, coming at you with another trailer reaction. Didn't think we were gonna do another one of these quite so soon after the one yesterday, but you know, when there's a good trailer that drops, you know, gotta watch it, and I really wanted to talk about it too because it's a character that I really love. It's my brother's favorite Marvel character, of course, talking about Spider-Man. Slightly different iteration though. This is it's called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is Sony's animated Spider-Man movie that I believe is coming out at the end of next year. This is, so to not get into the weeds too much on this, generally speaking, so obviously if you watched Civil War or Spider-Man Homecoming, you know that in the live action films, Spider-Man now exists within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and sort of it's a little muddy exactly how it works right now, but in and a part of that there is this there's this like Spider-Man universe that may or may not actually see this Spider-Man that we saw in Civil War and in Homecoming, but it exists in that world. So we're getting the Tom Hardy Venom movie, they're doing a Black Cat Silver Sable movie, they're doing a Morbius movie who's a vampire in the Spider-Man universe in the comic books, and so sort of in that second realm, I guess, and it's unclear if this animated film is really going to have anything to do with the live action. I'm guessing probably not, but sort of just because Sony still retains the rights to the Spider-Man characters, you know, obviously they're sharing and creating the partnership with Marvel and their cinematic universe, but they still retain the movie licensing rights to create their own Spider-Man properties. And so we're getting this animated Spider-Man universe, and so this is not featuring Peter Parker, who is obviously, as I mentioned, played by Tom Holland right now. This is a character named Miles Morales, and again, not to go into the weeds too much, because I don't want to lose you all on that, but essentially Miles is a younger Spider-Man who exists temporarily at the same time as Peter Parker. It was when he gets his powers, Peter Parker dies, and then he, through a series of events, takes over the mantle of Spider-Man in this new world. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's like the basic version of it. And so, if you noticed in Spider-Man Homecoming, and we'll get to the trailer in just a second, I promise. In Spider-Man Homecoming, there's a sort of a nod to the fact that Miles Morales might exist in the live action films, because there's a scene where Peter is talking to a character, let me pull it up right here, is named Aaron Davis, who eventually becomes the Spider-Man villain, the Prowler, who is the uncle to the Miles Morales character. So they drop that little nugget in the live action films. Who knows if they'll actually do anything with that, but that exists, whether it's an Easter egg or a setup for the future. Anyway, so that's all to say, that's who Miles Morales is. He is this character that exists in the continuity of Spider-Man. I guess in some iterations there's a multi-universe component of it where there are multiple Spider-Men. So I obviously haven't watched the trailer yet. I don't know if they're going to get into all of that, but it's called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which makes me think that we're probably going to get some alternate universe Spider-Man, which that could go in a whole host of different directions. So I'm very curious to see how deep into that rabbit hole they're going to go. So let's not stall any farther. Let's go ahead and dive into it. I'll give my reactions as I'm watching, of course, and then we'll talk about it on the other side, but let's go now. Oh. Okay. I was just doing the trailer before the trailer thing. Like the color scheme. This morning I woke up in the fortress of distortion. I'm in war with my emotions. Like the song. Okay, so the grave, so Peter Parker's already dead. I'm coming home now. I'm coming home. Nice. Oh, that's a cool shot.
Wait, so how many of us are there?
Huh. Okay. Huh. Well, I'm not entirely sure what exactly you would call the animation style, but I like the aesthetic of it. That it looks really cool. Overall, I like this trailer. I think it's a cool little look into Sony Pictures Animation has given us some cool things in the past, and I think this is an interesting entry into this. So obviously at the very end we see Miles talking to what looks like a Peter Parker with that line, how many of us are there, out there. Obviously we're going to go into different realms like the title implied. So it seems like this movie is sort of picking up where Miles doesn't really have a full grasp of all his powers, because you see him sort of like falling and flailing, and then he eventually launches the webs and sort of catches himself. So, I guess one of the storylines is that Aunt May and Mary Jane give Miles Peter's old web shooters. So I don't know if they're gonna go into any of that or anything like that, but just skipping over to the IMDb to look at some of the voice talent over here. Not a ton let me not speak out of turn here. So Mahershala Ali, back again. He's voicing Aaron Davis, so that uncle that I mentioned, and the shot like in the cityscape where he's like swinging through after a guy that sort of has a purple cowl, that looks like the Prowler to me. So I'm guessing he's going to be fighting against him, and that's going to be a whole thing at some point in the film, probably realizing that his uncle is a supervillain, so that'll be interesting to see. Shamik Moore is the voice of Miles Morales. I looked him up a second ago. He doesn't have a super extensive IMDb resume, so he's fairly young. I think he was born in '95. Obviously Miles is a kid, a teenager, so you need at least a young sounding voice. So it sounds like, we didn't really get much of him except for, I think that one line at the end. So hard to judge the voice talent because we didn't really get much of that here. But I really like the aesthetic of just sort of the shots that they chose for seeing Miles swinging through the city and just sort of going through this world. I'm sure there's a term for it, but just sort of like the multicolored lines in alongside the buildings. I thought that was a cool choice, and just sort of the scale of the city was I think really well done. I like the choice of the song. I need to look up what that was because I was digging that. Hopefully we've got some more of that flavor in the soundtrack of the actual film. So for a first look, like the trailer yesterday, I think it did what it should have. It's intriguing. It gave you a little bit of a sample of what the world is. Don't really have a sense of the story, but I was also reading that Christopher Lord and Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, at some point were involved in the screenwriting of this. Obviously the duo behind Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the Lego movie, almost the Han Solo movie. That's a whole nother ball of wax, we won't get into that. But that tells me that we're gonna have, some interesting tones and some good comedy, I think, weaved in there. And it seems like, those two, there are more screenwriters on here, but obviously they have a really good comedic sensibility about them. And, with the little bit that we saw in the Lego movie, obviously they have a passion for the comic book genre. And so I imagine that they'll bring in some of those sensibilities into the project. So I think there's a lot of good things happening here. And, Sony hasn't always churned out highly beloved Spider-Man films, obviously. So, I think there's a lot to like in this one, and I think I think in the animated format that it is, it doesn't feel super cartoony like they've done with some of the Spider-Man animated series. It feels more realistic, but just animated, if that makes sense. So I think it looks pretty cool. I'm excited to see a full trailer where we get a more of a sense of the actual storyline itself. But I think for a first teaser, this worked for me. I was digging that, and I want to hear more of the voices. I want to get a sense of what these characters really feel like, and see more of the other humans that he's going to interact with in this world, and just get a sense of more of the, I said already, but just more of the story. But so those are my thoughts, but I really want to hear what you thought about the trailer. So hop in the comments section below. Let me know what you thought. I'll again put the link to the trailer without my commentary in the description box, so you can go ahead and check that out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.